The dry wind carried a sharp tang of smoke across the scorched earth, curling around Chastity Rawlins's ankles as she stood in the smoldering remains of what had once been her home. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, traced the blackened timbers. Propped at odd angles, the collapsed roof that lay in ruin like a shattered promise. From her hip to the small swell of life growing beneath her heart, every fiber of her being trembled with exhaustion and fury. The sun had dipped low behind the distant mesas when the gang first appeared, a ragtag band of ruffians led by a man with a cruel scar across his left cheek. They rode in without warning, their horses kicking up plumes of dust that choked Chastity's nostrils, even as she scrambled to save what little she could, a battered wooden cradle, an iron skillet, the locket that held her late husband's photograph. But it ended too quickly. Flames erupted, devouring each piece of furniture, each treasured scrap of memory, until nothing remained but ash. "You think she's got no fight left in her?" one of the thugs rasped, spitting onto the heat-cracked floorboards as he dismounted. The man with the scar laughed, his voice a rasp through the gathering gloom. "A pregnant widow? What's she gonna do? Give birth with her bare hands?" He jeered. The others joined in, their cruel laughter bouncing off the charred beams. Chastity did not answer. Each breath she drew felt like grit in her throat, but she waited, silent as a rattlesnake coiled in ambush. The gang searched the wreckage, tossing aside smoking embers in their search for hidden valuables. They found nothing. The pouch that should have held her late husband's meager savings lay buried beneath rubble. "Move along," one of the men finally said with a shrug, his tone bored. "There's nothing left but ruins and sorrow." He turned to the scar-faced leader, but before the man could mount his horse, a sudden, whisper-soft click snapped through the air. "You've made a mighty mistake," Chastity's voice rang. Out, calm and clear. The thugs froze. From within the folds of her ragged shawl, she had drawn a Colt .44, its barrel glinting in the dying light. Her hand was steady, though her muscles shook. She spit the blood from her lip, remnant of the punch that had sent her sprawling to the ground, and leveled the weapon at the scar-faced man. "Name's Chastity Rawlins," she said, each word measured. "And you're gonna wish you'd never set foot on my land." For a heartbeat, the gang stared. Then the scar-faced leader laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. "You? Shoot me? Girl, you're gonna lose that baby before you get off a single round." Chastity's jaw clenched. She raised the Colt, her finger poised on the trigger. The scattered embers at her feet danced in a sudden gust of wind as the men drew back, uncertainty replacing their earlier bravado. "I'm not just a widow," she said, voice low and deadly. "I'm every man you've ever underestimated." A tumbleweed rustled past, indifferent to the tension that hung heavy in the twilight. The scar-faced man's smirk faltered. He raised his eyes warily, measuring Chastity in the fading light. Then, as if sensing the storm gathering in her gaze, he backed away. "Let's go," he hissed. The others followed, nervously glancing back at the smoldering homestead. Chastity held her ground until the last horse's hoofbeats faded into the distance. Only then did she lower the Colt. She sank to her knees amid the ruins of her life, the weight of grief pressing on her heart like a stone. But beneath the sorrow, something else stirred, something fierce and resolute. She pressed a trembling hand to her abdomen, feeling the life within her, fragile but unyielding. "They don't know who they've crossed," she whispered to the wind, "but by dawn they will." A raven croaked overhead, its dark form silhouetted against the pale wash of stars. Somewhere in the distance, the first howl of a wolf echoed through the night. Chastity Rawlins rose, her shoulders squared. Her Colt held ready. The farm was gone, but she still had her name, her resolve, and soon they would come to learn the terror that one wronged woman could unleash. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Dawn crested the horizon in bruised purples and fiery golds, casting long shadows across the desolate plain. Chastity Rollins stood atop a low ridge, the world stretching out before her in silent witness. Her shawl still bore ash and soot, and her Colt .44 was clenched in her gloved fist, steady as the heartbeat drumming in her chest. She scanned the horizon where the burned remnants of her homestead lay hidden by a wisp of smoke. Beneath her breast, the life she carried stirred, a reminder that her fight had only begun. The whistle of the morning wind carried rumors of movement, hoofbeats, low voices, the faint clink of spurs. Chastity inhaled slowly, centering herself. She hadn't slept. Sleep was for the living who still believed injustice could be corralled by lawmen. But out here, in this forgotten stretch of West Texas, lawmen answered to whoever had the thicker wallet or the fastest gun. She recalled the men's mocking laughter, the jeers about her fate as a pregnant widow. Her knuckles whitened around the Colt's grip. They had underestimated her heart, her resolve. The steel coiled in her veins. Below her, a pack of wild coyotes emerged from a stand of mesquite, their pale eyes fixed on her as though they sensed her sorrow and her rage. Chastity offered them no mercy, but in that moment, she found kinship in their survival. They, too, scavenged what they could to feed their young, forging ahead in a land that showed no quarter. The first pursuers arrived just as the sun burned bright overhead. A man on horseback, dressed in two fine leathers and a ribboned hat, trotted onto the plain, flanked by two others whose faces bore the familiar smug cruelty she had faced the night before. They slowed at the base of her ridge, shading their eyes. "Well, looky here," the ribbon-hatted man called, voice carried by the wind. "Widow's alive after all." He spat a wad of tobacco onto the sand. "Didn't think you had the strength to make it through the night, Mrs. Rollins." Chastity's gaze dipped to the Colt, then rose to meet his, unwavering. "My name is Chastity," she said, voice clear and unwavering. "And I intend to see justice done." The men laughed, circled, urged their horses closer. Cattlemen's ponies bred for speed, though overburdened by arrogance. "Justice?" the ribbon-hatted man sneered. "Justice got a price tag, and you're flat broke." Chastity squared her shoulders. "I'm not flat broke." She let her Colt rest in her palm. With deliberate care, she fished a tarnished silver locket from her pocket and flipped it open, exposing the small photograph of her late husband. The men's laughter faltered with the wind. "You killed my Jonathan," she said softly, voice heavy with sorrow. "You burned my home. You left me for dead. But I'm far from defeated." The ribbon-hatted man's eyes narrowed. "You're just a woman. A widow with a belly full of trouble." Chastity's hand tightened on the Colt. "I'm more than that. I'm life and death rolled into one. And if you want to survive this, you'll ride back to town and spread word that Chastity Rollins doesn't take kindly to varmints who hunt the defenseless." The men snarled, spurs clinking, but Chastity held her ground. Below, the coyotes watched. A tension crackled in the air, as if the land itself conspired with her rage. Suddenly, a shot rang out from the flank of the ridge, sharp and precise. The ribbon-hatted man lurched, clutching his left shoulder. His horse reared, panic in its eyes. The other two drew their revolvers, scanning for the unseen shooter. "You think a shot-slinger helps you?" one of her pursuers barked. "I better." Chastity replied, voice calm despite the pounding in her chest. "Because right now, you're outlaws to every man with honor in this valley." She pivoted, taking aim, but when she fired, it was not at the men below, but at the dry brush behind them. A burst of flame shot upward, sparks dancing like fireflies. The second man dropped from his saddle as the flames engulfed the grass, cutting off their route back to town. Panic seized them. With a frantic curse, they galloped toward the ridge's opposite side, but the shooter's bullets chased them, each crack of the rifle echoing like thunder across the plains. When the smoke cleared, only one horse remained, and the men lay scattered, groaning in the dust. Chastity descended the ridge, Colt in hand, surveying the wreckage of their arrogance. She knelt by the ribbon-hatted man. ripping the brim of his hat aside to expose his eyes, now clouded with fear. "Name what I owe you," she said quietly. He trembled, opening his mouth, but no words came. She nodded toward the small collection of belongings in his saddlebag, a pouch of coins, a rolled-up map, and a brand-new sheriff's badge. "That," she said, lifting the badge so the sunlight glinted off its polished star, "is the start of my payment," he whimpered. She tucked the badge into her pocket. "Ride back to town," she instructed, voice cold. "Find the man who hired you. Tell him Justice Rollins is coming for him next." He nodded frantically, fear making him nimble as a rabbit. With a final glance, he vaulted onto his crippled mount and galloped away. Leaving Chastity alone with her resolve. She hefted her rifle, feeling its weight against her shoulder. The morning sun climbed higher, and in its light, she saw the smoldering remains of more than just her farm. She saw a path forged in vengeance and righteousness, a path she would ride with every ounce of her strength. Chastity Rollins turned her back on the ridge, walking toward the distant silhouette of Devil's Gulch, where the man responsible awaited. As she crossed the plain, the coyotes fell silent, watching her pass. Even they seemed to sense the promise in the wind. A new legend was riding through the west. The road into Devil's Gulch was a ribbon of dust and rock, winding through low mesas that cast deep shadows in the midday sun. Chastity Rollins rode at its center, her pregnant belly pressed against the cantle of her saddle, the reins held. In one calloused hand, her rifle in the other. Each mile carried her farther from the ruins of her farm and closer to the man who had set those flames to her life. A hawk wheeled overhead, its cry sharp against the silence. Chastity's mind drifted briefly to her husband, Jonathan, strong-shouldered, quick to laugh, and unafraid to stand his ground. Together they had built their home piece by piece. The clapboard walls, the small orchard of peach trees, the livestock that had flourished under their care. Now, all that remained was a charred memory and a hunger for retribution that burned fiercer than any tumbleweed blaze. She urged her mare forward, contemplating the man she sought, Jeremiah Fisk, cattle baron, turned political kingpin, whose reach extended from Whispering Pines to the border towns. His name had been a whisper at first, attached to rumors of land grabs and ruthless tactics. But only when he set his sights on her homestead, convinced a lone widow would bring him no resistance, had her fury taken root. Two riders appeared on the ridge ahead, their silhouettes momentarily framed against the sunlit sky. Their posture was familiar, arms draped casually over saddles, rifles cradled as if more props than weapons. As they crested the rise, Chastity slowed her horse, studying them. "Afternoon, ma'am," one called, tipping his hat in a mocking bow. "Mr. Fisk's missive said you'd be making this ride." "You're too late," Chastity replied evenly. "Fisk's men have answered for their crime. Now I'm here for the man who set them loose." The second rider chuckled. "And what's to stop us? We're just riders, not the boss himself." Chastity lifted her rifle, sighting. "I've stopped worse." The riders exchanged nervous glances. Then, in an explosion of motion, they raised their rifles and fired. The cracks of gunfire split the air as Chastity dropped low, her horse rearing. A bullet chipped the top rail of her saddle, sending splinters into her thigh. Pain bloomed, white-hot, but she tightened her jaw and returned fire. Her first shot rang true, stripping the hat from the first rider's head. The second fell from his saddle as a bullet tore through his shoulder. Both hit the ground with grunts. As Chastity vaulted off her mare, firing 2 more rounds into the dust at their feet, her chest heaved as she advanced, ignoring the ache in her leg. A man hesitated, hand trembling as he reached for his pistol. "Not this time," Chastity murmured, pressing her barrel against his temple. He nodded, tears welled in his eyes. "Tell Fisk. Tell him it's not his hired hands he's dealing with." Chastity kicked him forward, then turned her gaze up the gulch. The narrow canyon walls loomed closer now, their sheer faces threaded. with gun ports and ambush waiting to happen. But she rode on, Colt and rifle ready. Devil's Gulch was aptly named, jagged stone sentinels on either side, dust swirling in eddies, and the far end shrouded in the shadow of a lone ridge. As she rounded the final bend, the first sight of Fisk's compound came into view, a low, fortified stockade built from rough-hewn logs, watchtowers bristling with sentries, horses stamped nearby, and behind the walls, men moved like ants hauling. Crates, tending livestock, loading rifles. Above the gates, a broad banner fluttered, Fisk Livestock and Land Co. It snapped in the wind with a cruel flapping. As if mocking her, Chastity dismounted before the gates, her movements deliberate. She stepped into the courtyard, every eye on her as she walked toward the center. A hush fell. The sentries paused. Mid-step, a door swung open, revealing Fisk's silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered in a tailored coat, with a gold-braided hat tilted at a rakish angle. His polished boots caught the sunlight as he descended the steps, a lazy smile on his lips. "Mrs. Rollins," he said, voice smooth as whiskey, "I've been expecting you." He gestured to the courtyard. "Quite a show you put on." Poor men. Didn't know what hit them. Chastity withheld her rage. "They're gone." Fisk's smile didn't falter. "Mercy's not a virtue I hold for cowards." She drew her Colt in one fluid motion. "I don't need mercy from you." A sudden whistle cut the air. Chastity froze as 4 rifles barred her path, trained in her direction. Fisk's grin widened. "Oh, but you do," he said. "You're just one woman. How long until your strength gives out? How long until that child inside you ... gives you no choice but to kneel?" Chastity's breath caught at the cruelty in his tone. She squeezed the Colt's grip until her knuckles blanched. "I'm not kneeling," she spat. "I came for justice." Fisk laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "Justice is a luxury. The strong make the rules out here." He nodded to his men. "Bring her in." They advanced, rifles raised. But Chastity was ready. She fired once, her Colt's report echoing off the wooden walls as the lead soldier stumbled, clutching his chest. He fell, bringing the others off balance. In the scramble, she leveled her rifle, firing twice more, each shot precise. A rifle clattered to the ground. Another sent a man staggering. Amid the chaos, Chastity's eyes never left Fisk. He stood, his ground, a single pistol drawn, his expression turning grave. Suddenly, there was a flash at the entrance. A rider burst through the gate's dust, trailing behind her like a ghost. She leaped down and dropped the horse, wrenching the Colt .45 from her belt. "Chastity!" she cried, voice trembling but sure. The newcomer raised her gun, firing at the nearest sentry, sending him sprawling. In an instant, Chastity recognized the woman's face, Scarlet May, her childhood friend and former deputy in Whispering Pines. "Get down!" Scarlet shouted. She joined Chastity, firing a round that clipped a rifle from a third soldier's hands. Sparks flew as metal scraped against stone. Together, they provided cover fire, driving Fisk's men back toward the compound's gate. Chastity felt the strength in her arms, the determination that her unborn child had ignited. Fisk's eyes glinted with fury. He lowered his pistol. "Too late," he snarled. "Your friend can't stop this." Scarlet squeezed off another round. "You never counted on us sticking together." She dove for cover as another shot rang out. Chastity surged forward, Colt raised, feeling each step like a drumbeat. She didn't flinch when Fisk fired. His bullet caught her shawl, tearing ragged fabric but wounding no one. "This ends now," Chastity said, voice cold as steel. She stepped into the open, facing him alone. The courtyard grew silent save for the distant clink of buckets and the crackle of dying embers from her torn shawl. Fisk lifted his hat, a gesture of mock courtesy. "Bravery's admirable, Mrs. Rollins. Foolish, but admirable." Chastity's hand didn't waver. "Then call me foolish." Lightning crackled overhead, distant, but menacing. A storm was gathering, mirroring the tempest in her heart. She squeezed the trigger. The shot shattered the afternoon stillness, sharp, decisive, ringing against the stockade walls like a clarion call. Chastity Rollins's Colt roared, the recoil biting into her hand, but her gaze never wavered. Jeremiah Fisk's hat flew off, in a swirl of dust and brim. His eyes widened, shock and fury carved into his features in an instant. He clutched his chest, felt the warm trickle of blood beneath his tailored coat. One breath, and his life would spill onto the wooden planks. Another. Soul claimed on Chastity's path to justice. He pressed a gloved hand against the wound, staggering backward, collapsing onto the flagstones. Silence fell, a void so complete that even the distant crackle of loose timbers seemed an intrusion. The hired guns froze, rifles trembling in their grasp as they stared at their fallen master. The banner above Fisk Livestock and Land Co. fluttered mournfully in the sudden breeze, as if mourning their leader's downfall. Chastity lowered her Colt, her breathing ragged beneath the swirl of adrenaline. She stepped forward, boots echoing. On the stones, each footfall affirming her conviction. Behind her, Scarlet May emerged from cover, her rifle lowered, eyes wide. He's dead," one of the men whispered, voice cracking like a whip. Another spat. "Not yet, fella. He may be dying, but he's still breathing." Chastity paused beside Fisk's prone form. His breathing was shallow, life ebbing. She racked her mind for the words that would break him, the words that would truly finish this. "You killed my home," she said softly, voice etched with sorrow. "You thought a pregnant widow was no match for you. You were wrong." He coughed, a ragged sound that mixed blood and regret. His eyes fluttered, searching hers. "Why?" he rasped. "Why me?" Her gaze hardened. "Because a man who burns innocence deserves the same fate he condemns." She turned away. Around her, Fisk's men knelt, dropping their weapons, as if her very presence demanded surrender. Scarlet moved to her side silently, falling into step. Chastity surveyed the compound, once a symbol of unchecked power, now hushed under her dominion. She felt the baby move, a gentle flutter against her gut. Ahead lay the exit freedom. Behind her lay vengeance and the scars that would never fade. A sudden rumble shook the ground, the first low roll of thunder. Clouds gathered overhead, dark and foreboding, streaked with light. The storm was coming, a cleansing storm for Devil's Gulch. She reached the gates, paused, and looked back at Fisk's broken form and the men who remained. "Remember this day," she called. "Remember that the West has a new reckoning. And may it be the last." With that, she slid onto her horse and urged it forward through the creaking gates. The storm broke in earnest as rain pelted her face cold, invigorating, washing away the dust and blood of battle. Lightning forked across the sky as she climbed the ridge, her silhouette etched against the storm-lit horizon. Below Devil's Gulch lay silent, awaiting the coming dawn. Chastity Rollins rode onward, each hoofbeat a promise that no wrong would go unpunished. And where the storm touched the earth, new legends were born amidst the thunder and the rain. The wind had shifted by the fifth dawn after Devil's Gulch, carrying the scent of pine smoke instead of rot and vengeance. Chastity Rollins rode into the small settlement of Red Rock Crossing, her mare's hooves stirring pale dust as her eyes pinpointed the saloon on the edge of town. Inside, Jeremiah Fisk's hired guns, two survivors huddled near the bar, faces drawn with fear. Chastity dismounted and left her mare to the ranch hands she had summoned earlier. With each step toward the saloon doors, her Colt and rifle swung at her sides, reminders of the path she'd chosen. Townsfolk peered from doorways, curiosity flashing in their eyes, but when they saw her, they quickly ducked back, like children. Avoiding a storm, inside, the saloon's proprietor, a grizzled man named Chet, polished glasses as though Chastity were the most dangerous patron he'd ever seen. The two men at the bar stiffened when she entered, their attempts at bravado fading under the weight of her gaze. "You lot owe me a confession," Chastity said, voice low and firm, "and you're going to give it." The first man, broad-shouldered and hollow-eyed, gasped. We warned Fisk he'd face more than a widow's wrath." "You warned him?" Chastity's eyebrows rose. He nodded frantically. "We told him you'd come, but he paid us well to see through his plans. Enough," Chastity cut in. She leveled her Colt at his chest. "You silence me, or you speak." The man swallowed. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He drew in a shaky breath. "He said he wanted our loyalty. Told us if we followed orders, no one would ever learn his secrets." Chastity's gaze sharpened. "What secrets?" she demanded. He hesitated, glancing at his companion. Before he could speak, the saloon doors swung open. A hush fell when Chastity's old friend, Deputy Scarlet May, stepped in alongside a small contingent of Red Rock's men. They wore badges and carried rifles, faces stern with resolve. "Thought you might need some backup," Scarlet said quietly. Chastity inclined her head. "This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story." Scarlet's eyes flashed. "Now." The man swallowed and blurted out what he had held back. "Fisk's been forging deeds claiming land that already belonged to families for generations. If you hadn't come, he planned to push everyone out by force and sell the land to railroad tycoons." Chastity's jaw tightened. Her vision of justice expanded beyond her own loss. It encompassed every family Fisk had wronged. She holstered her Colt and drew her rifle, slinging it over her shoulder. "Gather every deed in this county courthouse. We're taking them back." Scarlet stepped forward. "I'll round up the men. You get the deeds." Chastity nodded, her resolve unbroken as the rain from the storm the night before had washed away the dust on her face. So would tomorrow's justice wash away Fisk's corruption. And as she walked toward the courthouse, Colt and rifle at her side, she felt the strength of two hearts beating as one, hers and the future she would protect. The moon hung low and red as Chastity Rollins left Red Rock Crossing behind, heading northeast toward the foothills where Jeremiah Fisk's network of corrupt officials hid behind seals and signatures. The county courthouse had yielded garbled deeds and forged endorsements, but she had Scarlet May's deputized men to secure each rightful claim. Now her Colt and rifle felt lighter, tempered by every truth reclaimed. Her path stretched through scrubland and intermittent groves of juniper. Coyotes slunk away into shadowy crevasses, wary of the lone rider whose reputation already whispered. Through every trading post and cattle drive, each whistle of the wind seemed to carry her name. Chastity Rollins, the widow with fire in her eyes. Below the foothills, a small encampment lay hidden beneath cottonwood trees. Fisk's most trusted enforcers, men who believed in his cause enough to guard its secrets. Their campfires glowed like embers against the night, silhouettes moving by lamplight, rifles stacked within reach. Chastity dismounted at the lip of a ravine, heart pounding as she surveyed the layout. 2 sentries paced near the main fire, while 3 more clustered around crates stamped with the Fisk brand. A solitary rider lounged against a tree farther back, eyes closed as if sleeping, but the rifle at his side suggested otherwise. She pressed her back against the ravine's rough stone, pulling a pack from her saddle pommel. Inside lay a satchel of phosphorus powder and a length of fuse tools for a widow's reckoning. In the silence, her unborn child stirred, and Chastity whispered, "This ends tonight." She laid a small pile of powder against the nearest crate, burying it under a length of fuse. Then, inch by inch, she circled the camp, repeating the process until each crate, each symbol of Fisk's corruption, was rigged to burn. A twig snapped beneath her boot, and a sentry snapped to alertness. Rifle lifted. Chastity stilled herself, body coiled like a spring. The man paused, scanning the darkness, then relaxed and resumed his watch. Blood thundered in her ears as she continued her work, heart hammering with every step. Finally, the fuse loops met, and she retreated to the ravine's edge, every eye in the camp unaware of the danger lying at their feet. A match struck, candlelit spark swallowed by the night. She tossed it toward the fuse's end. A sizzle, a hiss, then a spark raced across the tethered line. With the fuse alight, Chastity grabbed her rifle and fired 3 times, once at each sentry's ankle, precise shots that rang out in the still air. The men crumpled with agonized cries, dropping their rifles. The camp erupted into chaos. Fire! A hulking enforcer roared, drawing his pistol as crates flared into flames. The camp's perimeter became a wall of fire, illuminating faces. Twisted with panic, Chastity vaulted into the camp, rifle sweeping arcs of defiance. Each shot found its mark. The man by the tree staggered as a bullet tore through his shoulder. The hulking brute dropped to his knees as lead found his thigh. In the swirl of smoke and sparks, Chastity moved with purpose, her Colt in her left hand, firing once at a third enforcer who lunged with a machete. "Not tonight," she shouted, stepping over the dying embers. "Tonight, you answer for every life you stole." As stifling smoke curled around her, she spotted her target, the camp boss Gannon Cola man rumored to broker every foul deal. He hurled a lantern at her feet, sending searing light across the ground and fueling the blaze. Chastity raised her rifle. "Gannon Cole," she called, voice booming. "Your reign of terror is over." Cole sneered, wiping soot from his mouth. He drew 2 pistols and fired, forcing Chastity to dodge. Her Colt barked in reply, striking one of his guns from his hand. Their duel unfolded in the heart of the inferno, sparks dancing around barrels of oil ready to ignite at the slightest heat. Chastity's ankle throbbed from a grazing bullet, and sweat mixed with ash on her brow. Cole charged, felling a crate as he swung his free pistol. Chastity sidestepped, firing twice, once grazing his arm, once tearing into his coat. With a final, defiant cry, she leveled her Colt at his chest and squeezed the trigger. The report echoed as Cole collapsed, the force knocking him sideways into the flames. Chastity staggered back as the fire blazed higher, the camp engulfed in a fiery storm. She pressed a hand to her swollen belly, feeling the life within fierce. Unbroken. By dawn, the embers would die, and Fisk's empire in the foothills would burn to the ground. Chastity Rawlins mounted her mare, gaze fierce with the promise of justice. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "you'll learn the price of underestimating." A widow with a bullet and a cause. The sky was an iron dome, heavy and brooding, as Chastity Rawlins rode into the whispering pines that cloaked the foothills east of Red Rock Crossing. Each pine stood sentinel, needles whispering secrets to the wind. Her mare's hooves sank into soft loam strewn with pine cones, the only sound amid the deep hush. Chastity adjusted her shawl, damp with last night's rain, and felt the Colt .44 resting against her hip. The recent victory at Fisk's camps had rippled across the valley. Every man with half a conscience whispered her name in awe and fear. But complacency had no place in her heart. There remained a single thread of Jeremiah Fisk's empire untouched, the clandestine ledger hidden within his family's mansion at the hill's crest. That ledger, bound in worn leather and stamped with Fisk's monogram, held every forged deed, every bribed official signature, every ounce of the embezzled wealth that had filled his coffers. Without it, Fisk's heirs might rise to reclaim the business. With it destroyed, her vengeance would stand irrevocable. The mansion appeared through a break in the trees, 3 stories of weathered stone, Gothic windows staring blankly, gargoyle eaves carved into snarling beasts. A wrought iron fence encircled overgrown gardens, its gate hanging on one hinge. Lightning-scorched columns flanked a broad staircase leading to double oak doors, their heavy planks scarred by time and neglect. Chastity dismounted at the gate, the mare's sigh of relief echoing. She tied the reins to a broken porch post and advanced, her boots crunching pine needles. Each breath felt like a vow. Tonight, the ledger would burn. Inside, the air was musty, thick with dust and memories. The grand foyer's chandelier lay shattered on marble floors, glass shards glinting like fallen stars. Chastity's footsteps echoed beneath tattered rugs as she passed portraits of Fisk's ancestors' stern faces painted with contempt. Eyes seeming to follow her crossing, she climbed the curved staircase, pausing at the second-floor landing. A heavy door to the west wing loomed before her, its brass knob tarnished. Beyond lay the study, Fisk's private domain. Chastity pressed her ear to the door. Muffled voices drifted through two men speaking in low tones, indistinct but urgent. She slipped back down the corridor, scanning for another entry. Around the corner, a servant's corridor opened to a back stairwell. She slipped inside, ascending in silence, each step a gentle creak under her weight. At the top, she found a small landing with a single door unlocked. Heart pounding, she pushed it open and slipped inside. A cylindrical safe sat in the far corner, its combination dial glinting in the moonlight, filtering through grimy windows. Nearby, a desk was strewn with papers and inked signatures, evidence enough of Fisk's corruption. Chastity knelt by the safe. Her gloved fingers began probing the dial. Remember always to listen, Bob's lesson echoed in her mind. She turned, it feeling for the subtle clicks. Each turn was measured, each release intentional. Time seemed to halt as the dial clicked into place. She pulled the handle. The safe door swung open on ancient hinges. Inside lay the ledger, its leather spine cracked, pages swollen with secrets. Chastity lifted it reverently and set it on the desk. She rifled through the pages, reading names, dates, and deeds that shamed entire counties. Her pulse pounded as she confirmed each fraud, each act of betrayal. She fetched the dagger at her belt, steel glinting against the leather cover, and slit the binding. Pages fluttered like wounded birds as she tore them free. Then, one by one, she fed each page into the maw of the fireplace, striking matches to set them ablaze. Flames curled and licked the edges of the paper, devouring ink and lies. The leather cover hissed and collapsed into embers. Smoke curled, carrying the stench of deceit into the rafters. Behind her, a sudden crash shattered the study's silence. Fisk's eldest son, Hamilton, burst through the door, eyes wild with rage and disbelief. "Mother of God, Chastity!" he cried, seizing a poker from the hearth. Chastity turned, rifle raised and steady. "Hamilton Fisk," she said, voice calm but unyielding. "Your father's empire ends tonight." Hamilton's lip curled. "You'll pay for this insult." He lunged, poker swinging. Chastity sidestepped, firing her Colt into the floor at his feet, a warning shot that split the wood. "Stay back," she warned. "There's a storm coming for your family, and you're too late to outrun it." The ledger burned behind them, red embers dancing like embers of a dying star. Hamilton hesitated, rage flickering into fear. Before he could strike again, Scarlet May kicked open the door, Colt drawn and aim unwavering. "Not tonight," Scarlet said. Hamilton's resolve crumbled. He let the poker drop, hands rising. Chastity holstered her pistol, the room's shadows illuminating her determination. "This ledger is gone," she said, voice echoing. "And Fisk blood will answer for every false word." Hamilton sank to his knees, face pale in the firelight. "I understand," he whispered. Chastity turned and took a deep breath. Tonight, the heart of Fisk's power had been destroyed. Yet, the night stretched on, and with it, the promise of justice carried her onward. Night had fallen by the time Chastity Rawlins and Deputy Scarlet May crested the final ridge overlooking Fisk's mountain ranch, an imposing fortress carved from shale and timber, lit by lanterns that glowed like distant stars against the inky sky. The air here was thin, the wind carrying a crisp chill that bit at exposed skin. Below, A winding road led to heavy gates manned by a pair of watchmen, whose silhouettes were barely visible beneath their wide-brimmed hats. Chastity dismounted, her breaths shallow in the altitude, her Colt .44 slung at her side, and her rifle cradled gently. She pressed a hand to her slowly growing belly, feeling the life within steady her resolve. Scarlet May dismounted as well, hand resting on the grip of her pistol. "We'll move from the east flank," Chastity whispered, nodding toward a narrow cattle path that wound around the base of the mountain. "Stealth and speed. We take out the sentries, breach the gate, and find Fisk." Scarlet checked her gear. "What about Fisk's private guard?" "We avoid them. Our goal is Jeremiah. We'll use the shadows and the element of surprise." They advanced, boots muffled on the soft earth. The cattle path snaked past a series of corrals where lowing steers eyed them curiously before returning to their restless pacing. Chastity paused, listening for the sentry's lazy calls and the distant bark of a ranch dog. "On my mark," she said. Scarlet nodded. From her coat, Chastity removed 2 small flashbangs, homemade devices crafted from lightning powder. She attached them to lengths of fuse, lighting both at once. Handing one to Scarlet, she crept toward the first pair of watchmen posted by a rusted gate. "Now," she hissed. They launched the flashbangs in unison. The bright flare and deafening bang shattered the night, sending birds screeching into the sky as the sentries went down, blinded and dazed. Chastity fired 2 precise shots from her Colt .1 at each man's shoulder, ensuring they remained incapacitated but alive. Scarlet dropped the fallen guards' rifles into the brush. "Good hit," Chastity murmured. They crept to the gate, Scarlet working the lock with nimble fingers. Moments later, the gate swung open on silent hinges. The thick iron bars barely creaked. "Stay low," Chastity instructed. Inside, the ranch's stone courtyard lay deserted, save for the flicker of oil lamps lighting the walls. A path of worn flagstones led to the main house's double doors, flanked by turreted watchtowers. Chastity and Scarlet moved like phantoms through the courtyard, shadows among shadows. They reached the house's entrance just as a lone lantern clicked on inside, casting a rectangle of light through the transom. Footsteps approached. "Take him," Chastity breathed. Scarlet nodded, pistol raised. The double doors swung open to reveal Jeremiah Fisk himself, his frame tall and broad against the lamplight, his eyes narrowing at the sight of the 2 women. "Chastity." "Rollins," he drawled, voice smooth but strained. "I suspected you wouldn't rest until I was under your heel." Before he could draw, Scarlet fired once at his knee, sending him to the floor with a cry of pain. Chastity stepped forward, rifle leveled at his chest. "It ends now," she said, voice unwavering. Fisk looked up, sweat beading on his temple. "You can't kill me," he gasped, hand slipping toward his belt pistol. "I'm not going to kill you," Chastity replied. "I'm going to make sure you answer for everything." Scarlet cuffed Fisk's trembling wrists behind his back. "Deputy Fisk," Chastity said, using his name like a dagger. "You're under arrest for arson, land fraud, attempted murder, and the attempted theft of my property. You will stand trial in Whispering Pines." Fisk's face twisted with hatred. "You'll regret this," he spat. Chastity holstered her rifle. "No worse than you will." They marched him out into the courtyard, where Scarlet used a lamp to read the gate. Closed once more. The lantern light cut through the darkness, illuminating the captured titan of corruption as Chastity, Rollins, and Scarlet May led him down the path to her mare dot as they rode back toward Whispering Pines. Dawn's first light streaked the sky. Behind them lay a fortress of secrets fallen, a legacy of fear undone. Ahead lay the promise of justice for the widow and her child, a future forged in the fires of retribution, and the unwavering resolve of one woman who would not be cowed. The road back to Whispering Pines was a ribbon of scorched earth and promise, lit by the pale glow of dawn. Chastity Rollins rode beside Deputy Scarlet May, their silhouettes framed by the rising sun. Behind them trailed Jeremiah Fisk, handcuffed and humiliated, flanked by Scarlet's deputies. The violence of the past days had woven a new tapestry for this land, one stitched with vengeance, justice, and a widowed mother's unwavering courage. As they crested the final ridge, the familiar sight of Whispering Pines spread below. Cluster of wind-beaten buildings, narrow dirt streets, and the ever-present silhouette of the Silver Star Saloon perched on the edge of town. A crowd had gathered in the square, faces drawn from fear and hope, whispering the widow's name. Chastity dismounted in the central plaza, the townsfolk parting respectfully. Scarlet held Fisk by the elbow. "Ladies and gentlemen," Scarlet called, raising her voice. "This is Jeremiah Fisk, guilty of burning a widow's home, land fraud, arson, and attempted murder. He will stand trial under the laws of this territory." Murmurs rippled through the crowd until a chorus of voices rose in unanimous approval. Chastity stood tall, hand to her brow against the sun's glare. "I came here as a grieving widow," she began, voice carrying through the hush. "I leave as a mother, protector, and citizen of Whispering Pines. Let this be a lesson. No man, no matter his wealth or power, stands above justice." Fisk's sneer was gone, replaced by something uncertain, a crack in his facade. "What sentence do you demand?" Scarlet asked the crowd. A heavy-set ranch hand stepped forward, voice firm. "Hang him at high noon, ma'am. Let the crows feast tonight." Murmurs of agreement echoed, but Chastity shook her head. "Justice isn't vengeance," she said quietly. "It's a chance to mend what's broken. Fisk will serve 20 years in the state penitentiary, and every dollar of his wealth will be returned to those he stole from." A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. 20 years in restitution. It was more than Fisk deserved, yet tempered by mercy. Scarlet nodded. "So ordered, Mrs. Rollins." Fisk's eyes burned with hatred, but he bowed his head under the new reality. The sheriff stepped forward and read the formal sentence as Chastity watched, heart heavy with the weight of her choices. Around her, the sun climbed higher, shining. On a town reborn. Later, Chastity returned to the saloon. Inside, Nate Hawkins polished glasses with his usual precision, though his eyes glimmered with newfound respect. Emma Hawthorne offered her a whiskey glass water, by Chastity's request, and she accepted, feeling the sting of cold liquid on her parched throat. "Took care of Fisk," she said softly. Nate set down the glass. "He won't trouble these parts again." Chastity's gaze drifted to the window, where Scarlet and deputies led Fisk toward the jail. "It's not just my fight," she said, voice catching. "It's ours." Nate nodded. "Whispering Pines stands as a witness. No one rides over us." Chastity touched her belly, feeling a gentle kick. "We survived my storm. Now it's time for peace for both of us." Nate offered a rare smile. "Peace is something worth fighting for, Mrs. Rollins." Outside, the wind teased the saloon. Doors open. The morning light poured in, casting golden shafts across the polished floor. Whispers of gratitude filled the alley. A raven caught atop the nearby water tower, no longer a harbinger of doom, but a witness to a new dawn. Chastity raised her glass. "To tomorrow," she toasted, and the people of Whispering Pines, whose lives she had saved and whose spirits she had lifted, echoed her words. "To tomorrow." The morning sun was an unforgiving glare as Chastity Rollins led Jeremiah Fisk's defeated convoy down the dusty road toward Whispering Pines. Behind them, Scarlet May's deputies rode with clipped reins, their faces grim but resolute. Each town they passed bore witness to Fisk's downfall, ranchers tipping hats, children pausing their games, and shopkeepers pausing their chores to stare at the subdued cattle baron. As they entered Whispering Pines, word had spread like wildfire. A crowd gathered around the jailhouse at the edge of town, where Fisk was to be processed. The square thrummed with anticipation, whispers of awe and vengeance lingering in the air. Chastity dismounted near the wooden railing, Colt still holstered, but hand twitching with the old familiar urge. Scarlet took Fisk's arm, guiding him toward the cell. Chastity's gaze drifted to the assembled faces, friends, neighbors, and strangers united by the widow's battle. "This isn't over," Fisk spat at Chastity as he was forced to his knees before the cell's iron bars. She leaned in, eyes cold and sharp. "This is just the beginning," she said, voice low. "A beginning of justice for those you wronged." Fisk's laugh was bitter. Justice is a woman's fantasy. Before Chastity could respond, the jailer, an old friend named Tom Rogers, stepped forward, keyring jangling in his hand. He met Chastity's eyes with quiet respect. "I'll make sure he gets what's coming," Tom promised. Chastity nodded. "And the families he stole from will get their deeds back." She turned to the crowd. "Today marks a new era for whispering Pines," she proclaimed. "One where no coward hides behind gold, and no bully terrorizes the meek. May every mother, father, and child know safety in this valley, for I will stand watch so long as I draw breath." A cheer rose, voice upon voice, echoing off the wooden facades and scattering pigeon-wing clouds overhead. Chastity felt a warmth spread through her chest, a blending of fatigue and triumph. Later that afternoon, she walked through the town, offering quiet words and nods to those she passed. At the courthouse, Scarlet and Tom gathered the honest deeds bundles of parchment bound with twine. Chastity's eyes shone as she watched families receive their rights anew. The sheriff's office bell rang, echoing through the mid-afternoon haze, summoning Chastity to a private meeting. She found Sheriff Mallory, her old friend, waiting with a leather-bound journal. "I've been keeping records," he said, handing over the journal. "Names of everyone you saved, every wrong you righted. This community owes you more than words." Chastity ran a finger over the faded cover. "It's not me they owe," she said softly. "It's each other. We did this together." Sheriff Mallory nodded. "Still," he said, eyes sincere, "this belongs to you." Chastity accepted the journal, feeling its weight settle in her hands. She thought of her child to grow strong in a land made safe by countless small acts of bravery. As the afternoon sun slanted toward the horizon, Chastity Rawlins mounted her mare outside the saloon. The sign above its door, a silver star caught the light and shimmered. She inhaled deeply, tasting the dust, and promised that tomorrow the trial would begin. And by tomorrow evening, Jeremiah Fisk's name would be struck from every record of power. But tonight, in Whispering Pines, a pregnant widow had rewritten destiny. Chastity spurred her mare toward the rising hills, silhouette bathed in gold. Her colt rested comfortably at her side, not as a weapon of vengeance, but as a guardian's emblem. As she rode, the wind whispered through the pines, carrying her vow across the valleys. Justice would flow like water here, pure and unending. The night before Ignition Day was restless. Chastity Rawlins could not sleep, the journal from Sheriff Mallory resting on her bedside table. Its pages were filled with names, deeds restored, and the scars left on Whispering Pines. She cradled her swollen belly, feeling the life within moving with purpose, a heartbeat echoing her own resolve. By dawn, the town would celebrate her victory, but Chastity chose solitude beneath the juniper trees outside town, where she could speak to Jonathan's spirit. She closed her eyes, whispering a vow to the wind, to protect her child, to honor her husband's memory, and to ensure the valley remained free. A rustle in the underbrush pulled her from reverie. Scarlet May emerged, her rifle slung casually, eyes bright with news. "They're gathering at the saloon," Scarlet said softly. "Ignition Day celebrations tonight. You'd best get ready." Chastity stood, smoothing her dress, cape brushing against the grass. "Thank you," she whispered, offering Scarlet a rare smile. Inside Whispering Pines, the saloon had been transformed, lanterns strung from rafters, tables cleared for a feast. and a raised platform at the far end for speeches. Families bustled about, bringing pies, roasted venison, and barrels of fresh cider. The air thrummed with music, fiddle, and banjo, weaving a hopeful tune. Chastity entered to a hush that rippled through the crowd. Every eye turned, respect and gratitude shining back at her. Nate Hawkins paused from polishing a glass, tipping his hat. "Mrs. Rollins," he said quietly. She nodded, approaching the platform as the band quieted. The marshal stood beside Judge Calloway and Sheriff Mallory. Judge Calloway tapped his gavel. "Citizens of Whispering Pines," he announced, voice carrying. "This town has faced its darkest hour and emerged victorious through the courage of one among us, Mrs. Chastity Rollins. Please." Chastity stepped forward, chest swelling with emotion. She surveyed the faces, each a testament to resilience. "My friends," she began, voice steady. "When this began, I stood alone against those who thought themselves above the law, but I realized quickly I was never alone. You stood beside me, offering help, hope, and strength." Applause rose, but she held up a hand. "This world can be unforgiving, but we've shown that compassion and justice can endure. I carry a child within me, a symbol of new beginnings. Let this child grow knowing a community that stands together, shields the innocent, and values every life." The crowd fell silent, moved. "We honor those we've lost and celebrate those we've saved," she continued. "Tonight we feast, dance, and light the ignition bonfire, a signal to every corner of the West that Whispering Pines is free, fortified by our unity." Sheriff Mallory lit the torch. Outside, a massive pyre of driftwood and old crate timbers crackled as flame leapt skyward, sparks drifting like fireflies. Music surged as the first violin note rang out. Chastity descended the platform. Scarlett joined her. Townsfolk formed a circle. Laughter and song filled the saloon. Chastity hesitated at the edge, then placed a gentle hand on her belly. "My little one," she whispered, "may you always walk in a world where justice flows like water." She stepped into the circle, joining the dance, boots tapping a rhythm that matched her heart. Flames outside painted the windows in amber hues. Inside, the saloon pulsed with new life, and as the night deepened, the widow's sacrifice and the community's unity became legend, a story passed on around campfires, a testament to the power of one woman's quest for justice and the enduring strength of a town that refused to bow to tyranny. Ignition Day was born, a yearly celebration of freedom, hope, and the promise that Whispering Pines would never forget the widow who set the West ablaze with courage. The courtroom in Whispering Pines was packed to bursting. Men in dusty hats leaned forward with strained expressions. Women clutched handkerchiefs, and children perched on windowsills like silent sentinels. The raised judge's bench, carved from polished oak, caught the late afternoon light, illuminating the gavel that waited to enact the verdict. Chastity Rollins stood at the center aisle, her hand pressed against the swell of her gown, feeling the baby kick as if affirming her resolve. Her shawl, once a symbol of her mourning, now draped her shoulders with dignity. Beside her, Scarlett May stood at ready, both witness and protector. Judge Calloway, stern-faced and robed, rapped the gavel. "All rise," he commanded, voice echoing. The crowd obeyed. Jeremiah Fisk was led in, shackled but defiant, his gaze sweeping the courtroom with haughty disdain. His former guards, now witnesses, sat behind him, faces drawn as they awaited what came next. Chastity took a deep breath. "Your Honor," the prosecuting attorney began, voice firm. "We present Mrs. Chastity Rollins, victim of arson, fraud, and attempted murder. She has suffered great loss, yet stood unwavering to bring the accused to justice." The attorney laid out the evidence: charred timbers from her farm, reclaimed deeds, eyewitness testimony sealed with her Colt's serial number found at Fisk's camps. Each fact landed like a hammer. The courtroom in Whispering Pines was packed to bursting. Men in dusty hats leaned forward with strained expressions. Women clutched handkerchiefs, and children perched on windowsills like silent sentinels. The raised judge's bench, carved from polished oak, caught the late afternoon light, illuminating the gavel that waited to enact the verdict. Chastity Rollins stood at the center aisle, her hand pressed against the swell of her gown, feeling the baby kick as if affirming her resolve. Her shawl, once a symbol of her mourning, now draped her shoulders with dignity. Beside her, Scarlet May stood at ready, both witness and protector. Judge Calloway, stern-faced and robed, rapped the gavel. "All rise," he commanded, voice echoing. The crowd obeyed. Jeremiah Fisk was led in, shackled but defiant, his gaze sweeping the courtroom with haughty disdain. His former guards, now witnesses, sat behind him, faces drawn as they awaited what came next. Chastity took a deep breath. "Your Honor," the prosecuting attorney began, voice firm. "We present Mrs. Chastity Rollins, victim of arson, fraud, and attempted murder. She has suffered great loss, yet stood unwavering to bring the accused to justice." The attorney laid out the evidence: charred timbers from her farm, reclaimed deeds, eyewitness testimony sealed with her Colt's serial number found at Fisk's camps. Each fact landed like a hammer, driving home the crime's gravity. Judge Calloway fixed Fisk with solemn eyes. "Mr. Fisk," he said, voice cold, "how do you plead to the charges of arson, land fraud, and attempted murder of Mrs. Rollins?" Fisk sneered. "Not guilty," he spat, though his shoulders slumped. Hush fell. The jury, farmers, merchants, and ranch hands conferred in muted tones before filing their verdict. Judge Calloway rapped. "Will the jury foreman state the verdict?" The foreman, a gray-haired cattleman, stood. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts," he declared. A collective exhale swept through the courtroom. Fisk's eyes widened in shock. Judge Calloway's gavel fell. "Jeremiah Fisk, by the authority vested in this court, I sentence you to 20 years. The morning air was crisp, scented with pine and promise. Chastity Rollins stood at the edge of whispering pines, the rising sun painting the town's wooden facades in warm gold. Behind her, the Silver Star Saloon sign creaked gently in. The breeze, a silent witness to the trials overcome. Today marked a turn in the widow's saga, moment of respite before the next chapter unfolded. Though the trial had ended and Jeremiah Fisk was bound for the penitentiary, whispers of dissent lingered in the surrounding valleys. Some men, loyal to Fisk's memory, fumed over their loss, plotting from shadows. Chastity knew peace was fragile. Earned through vigilance. Scarlet May approached, deputies flanking her. "All clear," Scarlet reported. "No trouble stirred last night. Folks are celebrating Ignition Day." Chastity nodded, smoothing her skirts. "Good, then let's join them." They walked into town, greeted by cheers and laughter. Families swayed to the fiddle's tune. Children dashed through the square with ribbons, and elders shared tales of the widow's courage. At the saloon's entrance, Chastity paused. Inside, Nate Hawkins polished glasses, offering her a respectful nod. Emma Hawthorne peeked from behind the bar, eyes bright with admiration. "Come on in," Emma coaxed. "There's a seat saved for you." Chastity accepted, settling onto a stool. Scarlet joined her, and Nate poured 2 glasses of cider sweet, cold and crisp. "To Ignition Day," Nate toasted, raising his glass. Chastity clinked hers gently. "To new beginnings." Each sip tasted of triumph and the bitter tang of sacrifice. Outside, laughter swelled as the town reveled in its newfound unity. But peace, as Chastity knew, was rarely quiet for long. A sudden clatter at the back door drew their attention. The saloon door burst open to reveal a frantic messenger, dust coating his shoulders. "Ma'am Rollins," he panted. Raiders from the East Blackwood's bastard kin descendants. Of the Claythorne crew rekindling old feuds, silence fell. Chastity's heart stilled. She stood, Colt and rifle at her side. "Where?" she demanded. 2 miles east Ghost Creek Ridge, the messenger replied. Chastity exchanged a glance with Scarlet. They'll face justice once more, she declared. Outside, townsfolk paused their dance, watching as the widow strode forth. Rifle over her shoulder, Colt gleaming in the morning sun. Behind her, Scarlet and deputies formed an escort. Children pressed against their parents, eyes wide with awe. Chastity's mare pawed the earth. She mounted smoothly, legs steady despite her condition. Raising her voice so all could hear, she called, "When injustice rides again, I'll be there. Let every outlaw know that Whispering Pines never rests." A cheer rose fierce as the wind. Chastity kicked her heels, spurring her mare eastward down the dust-choked road, destiny calling once more. And as she rode toward Ghost Creek Ridge, the town watched, hearts afire with faith in their champion and the promise that no wrong would remain unanswered under the western sky. The first light of morning filtered through twisted oaks as Chastity Rawlins pressed her mare into a steady canter toward Ghost Creek Ridge. The road was narrow and steep, carved from rock and hemmed by boulders that loomed like silent sentinels. Her heart pounded with both anticipation and fatigue, but the life inside her seemed to urge her onward with renewed purpose. Beside her, Scarlet May rode in silent solidarity, eyes scanning the ridgeline where dust clouds marked the approach. Of Ghost Creek's outlaws, descendants of the notorious Clay, Thorn gang who believed the Prairie Shadow's legacy meant they could strike without consequence, Chastity dismounted at the crest, rifle leveled at the distant shapes moving against the sky. 10 men, at least, their horses arranged in a loose circle around a supply wagon. This band had terrorized settlers for weeks, emboldened by Fisk's downfall. Seeing an opportunity in the widow's absence, they think Whispering Pines is defenseless. Scarlet murmured, her Colt at the ready. "They'll learn differently," Chastity replied, voice steely as the rising sun. She raised her rifle and squeezed the trigger, the crack of a single shot echoing across the ridge. A man in a gray bandana toppled from his saddle, his revolt cut short by the widow's unerring aim. Chaos erupted as the outlaws scrambled for cover and drew their weapons. Chastity's mare reared. She held fast, adrenaline sharpening her instincts. Scarlet's pistol barked in quick succession, felling another man who lunged with a knife. Chastity fired again, this time at the supply wagon's wheel, sending wooden spokes snapping and a cloud of gear tumbling free. The outlaws shouted, rallying around their wounded. "Take cover!" Scarlet yelled. Both women slipped behind a large boulder as rifles cracked. Chastity felt a sting across her forearm, saved only by her shawl. She swallowed pain and returned fire, each shot deliberate, each bullet finding its mark. The battle unfolded in bursts of smoke and screams, horses whinnying in fear as they circled. Chastity seized the moment. She kicked free her mare's reins, moving behind the wagon's overturned crates and signaling Scarlet. "On my mark," she whispered. They burst from cover, Colt and rifle blazing. The outlaws faltered, faces twisting with shock at the widow's ferocity. Chastity's Colt roared, defying their disbelief as each shot dropped another man. Scarlet's pistol kept pace, a duet of measured destruction. Within moments, the ridge was silent save for the widow's steady breathing and the muffled moans of the wounded. Chastity holstered her Colt, rifle resting across her lap as she surveyed the aftermath. "Whispering Pines holds," she said softly. "Let this ridge stand as the first line of defense." Scarlet nodded, helping her climb back into the saddle. "And may every outlaw who dares follow remember this day." The sun climbed higher, burning away the shadows. Chastity and Scarlet gathered the disarmed men, binding their hands with torn strips of cloth. They freed the stolen supplies and loaded them onto the wagon, turning the outlaws' own cargo into evidence of their crimes. As they rode back down the ridge, the wind carried word of victory ahead. The child within Chastity stirred, a tiny promise of new life and of the peace she had fought so fiercely to secure. The road to Whispering Pines stretched out before them, each mile a testament that the widow's stand was far from over, and that the West's most feared duelist would ride as guardian as long as injustice dare raise its head. The late afternoon sky burned with streaks of amber and rose as Chastity Rawlins and Deputy Scarlett May rode into the narrow canyon known as Ghost Creek Ridge. The recent skirmish atop the eastern ridge had quelled one threat, but intelligence reported another band of outlaws camped within these winding walls, men hailing from the remnants of the Reed twins faction, seeking vengeance for their kin lost to the widow's relentless justice. Chastity's mare picked her way through rocky turns, ears flicking at every echo. Her Colt remained holstered, but her hand hovered near the grip of her rifle. Scarlett rode just behind, eyes sharp beneath her hat's brim. They reached a rocky outcropping overlooking the creek below. Sunlight glinted off a makeshift camp. 4 tents arranged around a central fire pit, horses tethered to nearby junipers. Smoke drifted lazily, bringing the scent of goose stew and stale tobacco. Chastity dismounted, motioning Scarlett to silence. "Tonight's tide is turning," she whispered. "We need to strike before darkness hides their movement." Scarlett nodded, crouching behind a boulder. Chastity laid her rifle across the rock's edge, calibrating her sight. She counted 5 figures moving near the fire pit, 2 more keeping watch at a higher ledge. She inhaled, squeezing the trigger. The rifle barked, a single shot ringing clear as a bell. One sentry at the ledge toppled over, rifle clattering down the slope. Chaos broke as the shot echoed. The camp center erupted in panicked shouts. Chastity and Scarlett leapt into action, guns blazing. Colt and pistol barked in unison, precision shooting that sent another outlaw sprawling into the creek. The remaining outlaws scrambled for cover, knocking over cooking pots and careening into tent poles. Chastity charged down the embankment, rifle cracking twice more. One shot, disarming a man clutching a knife, the next catching another in the shoulder. Scarlett covered her flank, felling a third outlaw before he could draw. They moved like a deadly duet, synchronized and unstoppable. Within moments, only 2 outlaws remained, one clutching a hastily bandaged arm, the other brandishing an axe. They backed toward the creek's edge, water rushing over smooth stones. Chastity emerged from the smoke, Colt leveled. "Lay down your axe," she commanded. The outlaw hesitated, axe raised. He glanced at his wounded companion, then lowered his weapon with a trembling hand. Scarlett cuffed his wrist as Chastity holstered her Colt. The creek's current carried blood and mud, symbols of yet another threat. Eradicated. They gathered the surviving outlaws and collected their weapons, then surveyed the camp. Tattered tents and cold embers bore witness to the widow's arrival and reign. Chastity retrieved a parchment from her satchel, maps and names she'd compiled from locals, and pinned it to a stake beside the fire pit. "This ridge stands protected," she declared. Scarlett raised her pistol in salute. "Every turn in the canyon echoes your name." "Mrs. Rawlins," she said. Chastity mounted her mare. "Then let it echo hope, not fear," she replied. They rode out of Ghost Creek Ridge as the setting sun cast long shadows behind them. Each hoofbeat was a promise. As long as injustice crept through the canyons and plains, the widow would ride armed with conviction and protected by the child she carried, bringing the West's most feared duelist to every corner where wrong demanded reckoning. The full moon hung high over the plains as Chastity Rawlins returned to Whispering Pines, weary yet unbroken. The jailbreak at Devil's Gulch Ridge and the skirmish at Ghost Creek Ridge had tested her iron will, but each victory had solidified her legend. Word of her deeds spread beyond the valley, carried on the wind, reaching ears that once scoffed at the widow's resolve. Yet peace remained elusive. Late that night, a rider arrived at the Silver Star Saloon, pounding on the batwing doors. Chastity, closing down the bar, swung them open to reveal a breathless messenger bearing a scroll sealed with crimson wax. "Mrs. Rawlins," he gasped, handing her the missive, from Governor Trask himself. Scarlet May joined her, curiosity and concern warring on her face. Chastity broke the seal, reading by lantern light. The governor's script was urgent. Bandits loyal to Fisk's jailbreak had ambushed the mail stage near Cedar Ridge, threatening communication lines essential to the territory's governance. Without intervention, the entire region risked descent into lawlessness. Chastity crumpled the letter, resolve hardening. No rest for justice, she whispered. Before dawn, she saddled her mare, Scarlet at her side, and rode east toward Cedar Ridge. The mail stage's path wound through the high desert, open country, where ambush was swift and deadly. Tracks in the sand told the tale. 3 riders moving north with a stolen mail wagon. They rode hard, adrenaline lending speed to their mounts. The desert sun climbed, scorching the earth, but Chastity's determination burned hotter. At midday, they spotted the ambushers camp a cluster of boulders offering scant shade. The mail wagon overturned, horses scattered, and riders pacing with ill-concealed fear. Chastity and Scarlet dismounted at a distance, weapons drawn. The bandits' Fisk's remnants, cutthroats hungry for chaos, spotted them almost instantly. The widow rides again, one snarled, leveling his pistol. Chastity stepped forward, Colt in hand. Stand down or face justice, she called. Laughed, cocking their guns. But Scarlet's first shot rang out, catching the bandit's hat from his head. Chastity advanced under cover of Scarlet's fire, each step a promise. The true battle erupted when the outlaws took the mailman hostage, pistol at his temple. Time slowed as Chastity sighted her Colt on the kidnapper's wrist, petrified to. Pull the trigger, let him go, she commanded. The outlaw's pulse thundered in his neck. He ducked as Chastity fired, a single precise shot that shattered the pistol barrel. The outlaw dropped the weapon, staggering in shock. Chastity holstered her Colt, moving swiftly to free the mailman. Scarlet disarmed the others, the fight ending in a hush broken only by labored breaths. The mailman, trembling but unharmed, saluted her with tears in his eyes. You saved the first-class mail, ma'am. The governor will be most grateful. Chastity nodded, helping him mount his wagon. She and Scarlet bound the outlaws and loaded them into the back dot as they rode back towards Cedar Ridge. The mail wagon's bell tolled a sound of victory and restored order. The plain stretched wide and forgiving under the setting sun, and Chastity's silhouette stood tall against the horizon, a widow whose fight had become the West's safeguard. Tomorrow, she would return to Whispering Pines, but tonight, the mail would ride on proof that one woman's courage could keep an entire territory connected and free. The first light of dawn glimmered on Whispering Pines rooftops when Chastity Rawlins returned from Cedar Ridge, the rescued mailman waving her off with gratitude. Scarlet May led the captured bandits toward the jail, their heads bowed in defeat. Yet Chastity's mind raced ahead to the final leg of her quest, retrieving the heirloom locket buried with her husband, Jonathan, beneath the pine grove at the edge of her former farm. The grove had become a silent memorial, oaks and pine saplings circling the grave in solemn vigil. Chastity had avoided it these past days, focusing on justice and mercy. But now, with Fisk's empire extinguished and her community secure, she needed closure, not just for herself, but for the child she carried. She rode in alone, Mare's hooves muffled on the pine needle-strewn path. The air smelled of sap and promise. Birds began their morning chorus, unaware of the human saga unfolding below. At the heart of the grove, a simple marker bore Jonathan's name in weathered script. Chastity dismounted and knelt, hands brushing away pine needles to reveal the spot where she had interred the locket. I've come, she whispered, tears welling, to say goodbye and hello. She began to dig with her bare hands, earth-cool and yielding. Each inch unearthed memories, laughter beneath the peach trees, Jonathan's hand on her cheek, the day they built their cabin wall by wall. At last, her fingertips brushed metal. She lifted the locket, dented, tarnished, yet unbroken. Chastity opened it, revealing Jonathan's photograph and a pressed violet he had tucked inside on their wedding day. "You believed in me," she murmured. "Now I carry your hope forward." She pressed the locket against her belly, feeling the future and the past converge. Behind her, a rustle in the thicket drew her gaze. Scarlet May emerged, rifle slung, eyes soft. "You all right?" she asked. Quietly, Chastity nodded, closing the locket. "More than ever." Scarlet offered her hand, and Chastity stood, placing the locket inside her dress near her heart. They mounted and rode out together, the final darkness of the grove replaced by morning's light. Whispering pines awaited, pennants fluttering for tomorrow's celebration, the birth of justice and new life. Chastity Rawlins swept her gaze across the horizon, resolve blazing in her eyes. "Let's go home," she said, her voice both gentle and fierce. And as they rode toward the town, the widow carried more than a locket. She carried the promise that her legacy, like the locket's chain, would endure for generations to come. The horizon bled with crimson as Chastity Rawlins left Whispering Pines behind once more, riding east toward the Emberstone mines. Reports had reached her of ruthless foremen using Fisk's disruption to enslave miners on unfair contracts, seizing stakes and driving families into destitution. The widow's heart ached. Her fight for justice could not stop where it began. Scarlet May joined her at the mine's entrance, skeletal shafts carved into scarred hills, bellows and hammers echoing with the clink of progress and greed. "They've corralled families into squalid shacks," Scarlet warned, scanning the grim encampment. "Foreman Blackwell enforces labor with threats and guns." Chastity dismounted, Colt at her hip. "Then we free them," she said. They walked among the miners, sunken eyes, calloused hands who recoiled at Chastity's approach. Yet hope sparked when she raised her voice. "I'm here to end your chains." The miners erupted from shelters, their collective cheer a thunderous roar. Chastity addressed the gathered crowd. "No man labors under threat on my watch," she proclaimed. Blackwell's enforcers, 7 men in coal-stained coats, advanced, rifles leveled. Chastity drew her Colt. "Back off," she demanded. They hesitated, emboldened by numbers, until Scarlet's pistol barked, clipping a rifle barrel. The widow fired twice more, once at a spigot valve to unleash steam that hissed in the air, forcing the men to stagger back, and once at the ground between them, sending gravel spraying. The miners surged forward, shackling the foreman to steel supports. Chastity stepped onto a crude wooden crate, raising her voice. "You are free," she declared. "Your labor, your lives belong to you, not to tyrants." The foreman trembled as the liberated miners recovered their dignity, tossing away shackles and tattered binds. Among the crowd, a boy reached Chastity with a battered pickaxe. "This was my father's," he said. "He died in these mines." Chastity knelt, eyes soft. "I'll honor him by making these mines just," she vowed. That afternoon, under her guidance and Scarlet's watch, the miners formed a council to ensure fair work and wages. Chastity oversaw the first distribution of supplies, food, clothing, and wages owed, handed from her own reserves, augmented by the town's contributions. As sunset bled into the canyon, she addressed the miners. "Manage this land with justice," she urged. "I'll ride beyond the horizon, but your strength will hold the line here." The crowd cheered, and Chastity mounted her mare once more. Scarlet joined her, deputies trailing behind. Together they rode west, the Emberstone Mountains fading in the distance, leaving behind a legacy of liberation and hope. The life within her stirred, a new heartbeat stitching together the scars of the past and the promise of a future built on justice. The widow Rawlins rode on, her resolve as unbreakable as the chains she shattered. The morning mist clung to the pines as Chastity Rawlins and Deputy Scarlet May made their final ride of the saga, this time toward the abandoned township of Iron Springs, where word had spread of a hidden weapons cache left behind by Jeremiah. Fisk's retreating men. Left unchecked, those firearms could reignite tyranny. Chastity's Colt and rifle were empty of vengeance but full of purpose as they crested the hill, overlooking the ghost town's silent buildings. Tumbleweeds rolled across dusty streets, and the wind whispered through broken windows. Chastity dismounted and stepped onto the wooden sidewalk, each plank echoing with the memory of empty saloons and shuttered homes. Scarlett followed, scanning the rooftops for any sign of movement. They said the cache is in the old mercantile. Scarlett whispered. Chastity nodded, moving toward the weathered storefront, its sign hanging by one rusted nail. Inside, shelves lay toppled, and crates were stacked high. She found the back room, a trapdoor in the floor barred by a heavy beam. With Scarlett's help, she pried the beam loose, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. Chastity lit a lantern, its glow illuminating a trove of Winchester rifles, revolvers, and belts of ammunition, enough weaponry to arm an army. Not today, Chastity murmured. They spent hours hauling each firearm into the daylight. Chastity lined them up on the boardwalk, working methodically to ensure nothing remained hidden. Townsfolk from Whispering Pines had followed at a distance, arriving now to offer aid. Together, they gathered every weapon, stacking them in a bonfire. Pit outside town. As the sun dipped low, Chastity set a torch to the pile. The flames erupted, the roar of burning steel and wood echoing across the valley like a declaration of finality. Sparks soared, carrying the promise that Iron Springs would never yield another tyrant. Chastity stood amidst the glow, Scarlett at her side. The life growing within her stirred once more, a reminder that this fight had purpose beyond justice. It was about securing a world where her child could grow without fear. "It's done," Chastity said softly. Scarlett nodded, eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "The last threat is gone." Chastity exhaled, the weight of years of battle lifting from her shoulders. "Then let's head home," she replied. They mounted and rode back toward Whispering Pines, the night alive with possibility and pieces. Quiet promise. Behind them, the bonfire burned down to embers, witnessing the end of one legend and the beginning of a new legacy. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The morning mist clung to the pines as Chastity Rollins and Deputy Scarlett May made their final ride of the saga, this time toward the abandoned township of Iron Springs, where word had spread of a hidden weapons cache left behind by Jeremiah. Fisk's retreating men. Left unchecked, those firearms could reignite tyranny. Chastity's Colt and rifle were empty of vengeance but full of purpose as they crested the hill, overlooking the ghost town's silent buildings. Tumbleweeds rolled across dusty streets, and the wind whispered through broken windows. Chastity dismounted and stepped onto the wooden sidewalk, each plank echoing with the memory of empty saloons and shuttered homes. Scarlett followed, scanning the rooftops for any sign of movement. They said the cache is in the old mercantile. Scarlett whispered. Chastity nodded, moving toward the weathered storefront, its sign hanging by one rusted nail. Inside, shelves lay toppled, and crates were stacked high. She found the back room, a trapdoor in the floor barred by a heavy beam. With Scarlett's help, she pried the beam loose, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. Chastity lit a lantern, its glow illuminating a trove of Winchester rifles, revolvers, and belts of ammunition, enough weaponry to arm an army. Not today, Chastity murmured. They spent hours hauling each firearm into the daylight. Chastity lined them up on the boardwalk, working methodically to ensure nothing remained hidden. Townsfolk from Whispering Pines had followed at a distance, arriving now to offer aid. Together, they gathered every weapon, stacking them in a bonfire. Pit outside town. As the sun dipped low, Chastity set a torch to the pile. The flames erupted, the roar of burning steel and wood echoing across the valley like a declaration of finality. Sparks soared, carrying the promise that Iron Springs would never yield another tyrant. Chastity stood amidst the glow, Scarlett at her side. The life growing within her stirred once more, a reminder that this fight had purpose beyond justice. It was about securing a world where her child could grow without fear. "It's done," Chastity said softly. Scarlet nodded, eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "The last threat is gone." Chastity exhaled, the weight of years of battle lifting from her shoulders. "Then let's head home," she replied. They mounted and rode back toward Whispering Pines, the night alive with possibility and pieces. Quiet promise. Behind them, the bonfire burned down to embers, witnessing the end of one legend and the beginning of a new legacy. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.